History is written by the victors, but the truth is often buried in the mass graves of the forgotten. Today, we unlock a file so dark that for decades, governments on both sides of the Pacific conspired to erase it.
This record belongs to Midnight Dread Archives.
In the remote district of Pingfang, China, during the height of the Second Sino-Japanese War, stood a massive complex. To the local villagers, it was a water purification plant. To the Japanese Imperial Army, it was a research facility. But to the thousands who entered its gates and never left, it was a living hell. This is the story of Unit 731, a place where science was divorced from morality, where humans were treated as logs of wood, and where the architects of the most brutal crimes in human history were never brought to justice. Every nightmare has an architect. For Unit 731, it was Shiro Ishii. A brilliant but sociopathic microbiologist, Ishii believed that the next world war would not be won with bullets, but with biology. In 1932, Ishii began his epidemic, Prevention and Water Purification Department. By 1936, it was transformed into a massive 6-square-kilometer fortress. Inside, Ishii held absolute power. He was a man obsessed with the potential of the plague, anthrax, and cholera as weapons of mass destruction. He viewed his victims not as people, but as Maruta, the Japanese word for logs. In Ishii's eyes, a person was merely a biological substrate, a vessel to be filled with disease and cut open to see the results. The crimes of Unit 731 were not just deaths, they were meticulously planned tortures. The most infamous was vivisection without anesthesia. Ishii believed that anesthetics would contaminate the biological data, so prisoners, men, women, and children, were dissected while fully conscious. But the horror didn't stop at the scalpel. Prisoners were taken outside in sub-zero temperatures. Their limbs were doused with water and beaten with clubs to see if they were frozen solid. Then, they were subjected to experimental thawing methods, such as plunging frozen limbs into boiling water. Pressure testing. Victims were placed in vacuum chambers to see how much pressure the human body could take before the eyes literally popped from their sockets and the organs burst. Biological warfare. Prisoners were tied to stakes in open fields and subjected to plague bombs, porcelain shells filled with fleas infected with the bubonic plague. Unit 731 was more than a lab. It was a factory. At its peak, it could produce 300 kilograms of plague bacteria and 800 kilograms of anthrax every single month. Ishii wasn't content with just testing inside the walls. The Japanese Air Force began dropping contaminated grain and plague-infected fleas over Chinese cities like Ningbo and Changde. Entire villages were wiped out by artificial outbreaks. When the war began to turn in 1945, Ishii ordered the total destruction of the facility. Thousands of prisoners were executed to hide the evidence. Plague-infected rats were released into the countryside, sparking outbreaks that would kill an estimated 200,000 to 300,000 people, even after the war had ended. This is perhaps the most disturbing part of the file. In 1947, the United States military reached a secret agreement with Shiro Ishii and his staff. Instead of being tried for war crimes at the Tokyo Tribunal, Ishii and his doctors were given full immunity. In exchange, they handed over all their data harvested from the screams and blood of the Maruta. The US government decided that the biological secrets Ishii held were more valuable than justice for his victims. Shiro Ishii never spent a day in prison. He died peacefully in 1959. Many of his subordinates went on to become deans of medical schools, heads of pharmaceutical companies, and even leaders of the Japanese Green Cross. The scars of Unit 731 are still open. To this day, the Japanese government has only recently acknowledged the existence of the unit, but never the full extent of its atrocities. We must ask ourselves, if the foundations of modern biological medicine were built on the suffering of those in Unit 731, how do we honor the dead? By remembering their names, by refusing to let the file be closed. The Maruta were not logs. They were people. And in the Midnight Dread archives, their voices will always be heard. Subscribe to keep the archives open. And remember, the most terrifying monsters don't live in the shadows. They wear white coats.